evolving landscape of cyber threats that can have severe consequences if left unaddressed. We've gathered here to explore the fundamentals of cybersecurity and how you can protect your organization from potential attacks. Our discussion will cover a range of topics, including the current cybersecurity landscape and the prevalent threats that businesses encounter today. Welcome, David. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Great to meet you. Great to meet you. I'm good.
Great. All right, so let's go through a few of the topical questions and the issues that we face today with regards to cybersecurity. And this is
Mhm.
just covering the cybersecurity basics. I mean, when we go to BizTech, we can delve into detail on the much more complex conversation with regards to cybersecurity. So, describe to me, David, describe the
Yeah,
current cybersecurity landscape and the kind of threats that businesses commonly face in today's world.
yeah. Well, again, and just to follow on what you're saying, I mean, this really is going to zoom in more from the business aspect of things, and I'm glad you brought that up because the one of the key things that people need to understand is that the cyber threats, the malactors, they are motivated by money. It's a multi-trillion dollar industry. And they are coming up with different ways to get at you. And one of the things that a good um, thing to think about is if they can reach you, they can breach you. Okay, and they have come up with a myriad of approaches to disrupt your business. And we've heard of many of them. Malware, which is software that will look to disrupt. I'm having an echo here. Are you getting that? Sorry about that. Yeah, that looks to disrupt your operations. You hear the other term as well, ransomware, which is a type of malware similar in nature to looking to disrupt your business. There are other threats that they impose, things such as denial of service, which essentially is multiple requests coming from all across the internet to disrupt your website or your cloud-based applications. So they flood the server with requests and literally bring your site or your application to a halt. Um, we've all heard of phishing, and I think we may talk a little bit more on that. That's another form of threat. Um, Other ones, such as business email compromise, where they compromise your email account and then masquerade as you. There's another one too where they can compromise your privileged accounts. That actually is the goal. If they can compromise a privileged account on your system, then they have the keys to the kingdom. There's another one that is pretty common. They call it the man in the middle attack, where they mimic your email address in a conversation between yourself and a customer, or yourself and a supplier, and eventually take it over. And one of the parties doesn't know he's no longer speaking to the legitimate party, and that is one way out that they get you to send them money. And I've seen that happen. That's happened a number of times here in Jamaica. The other one that I'd like to mention is this one called VPN. A lot of people still use VPN as a means of gaining access from the outside securely onto the corporate network. Problem with VPN, and we can get that into technical detail later, but the problem with it is that VPN is a listening service. You just knock on the door and it lets you in. You pass the credentials and you lets you in, and then you're on the network. You now have access to everything on the network based on your login. Now that worked in the days when we could assume trust, but that's no longer the case. There could be a malactor lurking on that endpoint that you're letting into your network. So many organizations have moved away from VPN to this thing we call zero trust. You trust nothing. And anything you let onto your network has to give access to a specific application or a specific resource based on policies. So those are some of the many ways that they can try and attack you. I don't know if that kind of gives you a good feel for it there, Twitty.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, I like what you mentioned about the VPN, and persons have the notion that if it is that you're on your VPN network, you're secure. Only persons within the organization would have access if that's the case. But you mentioned that once they have the credentials and they can pass through that door, and as an actor, I want you to just expound a little bit, because I think a lot of businesses have the false notion that once you access via VPN, or you're using VPN for your staff to access the network, it's safe. Could you just speak a little bit more about that and the zero trust technology?
Okay, so the whole concept of VPN is you're now extending your network out, beyond your walls, to give an idea. What you're effectively doing is now you're increasing the attack surface of your organization. And in this day and age, you want to do the opposite. You want to decrease that to the minimum. So that's one of the fundamental issues with VPN. The other one, of course, is, as I mentioned, you're assuming that the endpoint that's coming in is free from compromise. So what, in a nutshell, the approach with zero trust is that you do not allow anything to see inside your network. So essentially, what you do is you publish or allow a brokered connection from the outside to the specific application or resource inside your network, and that works whether it's a server or an application running inside your premises or in the cloud on one of the cloud providers. It's a private access, and that's what you want to protect against. And we can go into a lot more technical detail on that. But the key thing is that one of the biggest breaches during COVID was via VPN. One of the biggest breaches. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. All right. So you also mentioned about phishing. How can an employee or an employer recognize phishing emails and avoid falling victim of phishing attacks? I mean, one of the basic fundamentals of cybersecurity is that your staff members are the weakest link, and they would easily click on emails and get persons access to your environment. So tell us about how can they recognize phishing emails and avoid falling the victim of these.
Okay, so let's just say what is a phishing email? What's the definition of that? And a simple one is any mail that is asking for you to take some action. When you think about it, if you look at a typical phishing email, it's asking you to do something. Give me your, change your password. Click on this thing, and redeem some offer. And it always has some sense of urgency to do it. Do it quickly because this is going to expire, tomorrow. Hurry up, And the idea behind that is that because the human is the weakest link, the idea is that somebody who is busy doing 10 different things, as we're always doing, is going to, click the link and like, oh my God, what did I do? So it's very important that we develop what we call the human firewall. Because the humans, we are the weakest link. So we need to develop some better cyber hygiene with awareness. And this is what we call, cyber awareness training. And there are many applications and systems out there that allow offer that to businesses. But you asked what does a phishing email look like? Well, as I mentioned, something asking you to take, urgent action. You can always spot them. Sometimes there's bad grammar in it. The bad guys are getting better at English these days, so that isn't always the case. Then they do some unfamiliar greeting, which like why is my boss writing to me and calling me a certain name or addressing me in a certain way? This doesn't fit right. Another thing too is look at inconsistencies in the email address. Sometimes because they try and spoof your address. Always look at inconsistencies in that. Weird attachments, things like that. And anything really requesting you to take some action or give away something. So those are typically the things to look for. But the awareness training is very important because you want to reinstill this into people periodically. And you have to remember, most organizations have new staff that come and they need to be, get trained as well. So building that human firewall, very important as a protection against phishing attacks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. You provided some really good insight. And me, myself, I get those emails daily, especially through Hotmail. I'm not sure, but through Hotmail, I get those a lot. And how I know that they're phishing emails is, as you said, the email address, the domain. So if it's coming from Amazon and Amazon asking you to take an action, I believe they're asking me about updating my account. And when I look at the email, it says from Amazon customer service, but the email address is some other name that does not relate to the Amazon domain whatsoever. So
well,
I'm educated, I know what to look for.
I tell you one that happened to us. Happened to someone that works with us some time ago. They got an email from me asking for some transfer of funds, and it's at the bottom of it. It said sent from my iPhone. I use an Android, so right there. Okay, so those are little things that you can look out for. Okay.
Great. Okay, good. So these are some what we think are basic, but even the basics, you assume that your employees know what to do. So it's very good information just to kind of remind folks. I mean, the persons who are more technically savvy or IT would know these at the back of their hand. But as I mentioned before, your employees are your weakest link. And while you might think that this is something basic that they should know, they actually don't know, and that is where you can commit problems with your network.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. So the other hot topic, I mean, we hear about ransomware and we're seeing in the news government agencies are being attacked, asking for ransomware. Where are hackers asking for a lot of money? Are small businesses a target? I mentioned that we're looking at all the high-end companies, you're looking at the government organization, you're looking at probably enterprise, but small businesses probably tend that, oh, I'm small, I'm not a target for these hackers requesting ransom. Could you give us some insight on that, please?
Yeah. No one is immune, big or small. I mean, one might think that, well, I have no evidence to show that big companies here in Jamaica aren't specifically targeted. I don't have any evidence to say yes or no to that. But how the malactors go about, blasting out their emails laden with malware or what have you, is that it's literally they send it out to, on the internet, usually to some IP address block in our region, and you happen to be connected. So it was literally like rain. It just falls in your backyard. And so whether you're big, whether you're small, the threat is there for you too. So what happens is you have to consider is what is going to happen to me if I am subject to an a breach, or through these threats that are not specifically targeted to anyone, but they're looking for areas of vulnerability in your operations and in your infrastructure. That's all they're doing. So they're blasting this thing out and probing you to see, is this vulnerable here? Will somebody click on this? And if they do, then they'll move on to the next stage in the chain of attack. So no one's immune. No one's immune.
Thank you. I mean, I was just talking to a colleague yesterday as well about this whole ransomware and all of that. And this is, persons have this as a complete business. It's a corporation. People set up businesses just to find persons who leave themselves careless on the internet and vulnerability. So it's a corporation that runs like any other business. They have staff, they have their list. Just as though you would have your sales list, this is a corporation. These are companies and businesses that are known. But if you leave yourself vulnerable, then you're a target for them. So it's not something that is, as you said before, the hackers are becoming very sophisticated. You mentioned that they have improved their English, and with ChatGPT, I mean, you can write an email and have it, dressed up. So it's now a business for some persons. So it's really in your best interests as business owners, large and small, to make sure that you understand what the cybersecurity landscape look like, what are the vulnerabilities, get your staff trained. You mentioned training as well. I guess we can delve into that a little later as to how a person could access some of these training, where can they get that, etc.
Well,
but
one of the things, Twitty, that I'd like to just,
simple.
oh, sorry.
Right.
One of the things I'd like to add is that you hear these terms like, ransomware as a service. Okay. These guys are organized. And one of the key things that I'd like, any business owner to, firmly understand is that what worked yesterday don't necessarily work today. They have actively bypassed and defeated many of the previous things that we thought worked. And I would almost guarantee you that all of those organizations that we heard in the media that got compromised, the day before they got compromised or realized that they were compromised, they thought they were safe. So, how did that happen? Well, we need to understand that the bad guys are changing their tactics, and you need to assume breach. Okay, take that posture, assume the worst, and be able to have proper visibility of what's going on in your organization, on your network. We don't want to have the false sense of safety where if I don't see something happening, then it's not happening. No, that's the game changer in operating in a digital economy. It's invisible to you. So don't assume that because you're not seeing something that nothing is happening. You need to take all the proper steps, assume breach, and take the proper steps to keep up with what the bad guys are doing. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Going on to our next question, really. So we talk about ransomware, we talk about phishing, but what are some of the consequences of a cybersecurity breach for a business? Okay. In your experience, what have you seen? What are the consequences to a business?
Well, one of the, apart from the obvious, which I'll get into, the disruption to the business, one of the things that's coming up at the end of November of this year is that the Data Protection Act has a set of consequences for breaches where personal data is either corrupted or lost. First of all, from an organization, you need to be able to tell the OIC, Officer of the Information Commissioner, that there was a breach within 72 hours. Okay, otherwise there are penalties. How do you do that? Well, that's the tech guys can tell you about that. But the other real consequence is that there's up to a 4% penalty of 4% of your previous year's annual revenue, and that can be very consequential for an organization. So I'll leave that, as a thing. But if you think of it just from an operational perspective, that I'm no ransomware, say all my files are encrypted. How are you going to operate? It's different from when you lose stock or inventory, because that can be replaced. But when you lose data, how are you going to build? How are you going to make it again? It's gone. And when that is gone, then there has a serious consequence to the operations and indeed long-term viability of the organization. Reputational damage. If I am, storing and processing my customers' information and it gets lost, then what am I a trustworthy source afterwards? That's why many people don't, not say people, but we may not be getting all of the information that breaches are occurring. I believe they're occurring far more often than is being reported. My personal feeling. But those things will change in another couple of months, where we are obliged to inform the public. The other thing too is that I'll just say to organizations is that it might be an inevitability that you will get compromised. So you want to make sure that you can minimize its effect. And one of the things, just like having a fire drill and a disaster response for physical infrastructure of your operations, you need to have a plan of what to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3 of what to do. You do not want to be thinking about this in the midst of a very, very difficult situation, in the midst of a breach or a cyber attack. You don't want to be figuring it out at that time. You need to have a response plan in place and practice. Of course, you need to have your data, backed up in a safe place. And don't think that because you have a backup that the bad guys can't find it and corrupt that as well. So you need to be aware of those things. So the consequences of a cyber attack can be very, very, very serious to an organization. And just as you asked, some of the things that we've been seeing, I always kind of wonder, in the light of that, why you will hear things such as budget can't carry this. We need to plan for that next year. This is existential, so you may need to seriously consider, reallocating, in my opinion. No, that's
great.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you so much. I mean, one of the things that I asked myself, if you look at, say, 10 years ago, why is it that we're now hearing about cyber attacks in Jamaica? Almost every month, at least 1 or 2 incidents reported. Why is it that we're now hearing about this in Jamaica? Could you say?
Well, one of the things to realize is that the pace of attack is increasing. It's been increasing since 2010. Okay. And if you just follow how much money is being ransomed or offered for payment and to cover damages, through insurance and so on. If you look at that, it was like 3 trillion in 2015 worldwide. In 2021, that had increased to 6 trillion. The expectation is that it's going to go to 10.5 trillion by 2025. That's that's if you look at it as a country, that would be the third largest economy in the world. All right, and after Japan, or I believe. Okay, so the pace has increased. There's an attack. I think it's less than every 10 seconds. Okay, so yeah, you're gonna hear a lot more of it, and it's just not a matter of if but when. Again, I go back to my previous comment where, look, I mean, this is an existential threat to the business, and so we need to take action. And the thing is that if you think about it as your attack surface for your organization, if they can reach you, they can breach you. They're going to find all these ways to get at you, right? Get at the human. So if you can think of it as a big surface like that of where these guys can, throw their malware at you. The idea really is to try and take that attack surface and reduce the size of it. And there are a number of things that organizations can do right now and right today, because budget's tight, but at least start with some things. Start with those concepts that I mentioned earlier, to assume breach and to assume that they have found ways around what I currently have. So there's a set of things that you can do today to reduce that attack surface down and definitely improve your survivability. And then over time, shortest possible time, you can try and reduce that attack surface even smaller. And always be observing and improving. You can't set it and forget it. Those days have passed. I don't know if that kind of gives you an answer. Oops, not hearing you there, Chantal. I mean, Twitty, I'm not hearing you. You hearing her?
Because she's on mute.
Oh, you're on mute? Oh, bye.
Yeah, she's on mute. We lost it.
Okay, I think we might have lost Twitty.
Apologies for that. Sorry, I just had some Wi-Fi issues. Apologies. Yes, you were speaking about budget. We have about a minute left. If you could just leave the audience with some key takeaways right now with regards to cybersecurity and how can large business, small business protect themselves from ransomware. What are the key takeaways would you leave with the audience today?
Okay. All right. As quickly as I can. As I said, we recognize that budgets are not unlimited. Okay. So you need to start with some things. You may have some of these in place already. You may not. So if you do, bully. Email. Ensure that your email has a proper email protection wrapped around it. To make sure that the links that are embedded in there are scanned, and phishing emails, etc., identified. Make sure you have that. Make sure if you can. I mentioned VPN. Eradicate that from your network. Then I mentioned about having proper backups in place so that you can get back to the information. God forbid. I leave out you have to be careful of your internet connections, because you can browse to sites that are laden with malware and that can be downloaded onto your machine. So the other thing that you need to be looking at is patching. The bad guys try to take advantage of vulnerabilities that might be on your machine. So, and many of the worst breaches were taking advantage of a vulnerability in Windows for which a patch existed but was never applied, because patching is a pain. So make sure you do things like that as well. And there are other things, but the idea really is to look at what you got and try and reduce those areas where you're most vulnerable. And of course, I mentioned earlier about the human firewall awareness training is vital as well. And there's more. Okay.
Great, thank you. So those are some great nuggets that we have left with our audience. I wish we had more time, and I guess we can we'll follow up again on this conversation with you, David. I just want to thank you so much for joining us today and the information that you've provided today. As I mean, we call it cybersecurity basics, but I think it's invaluable, and we certainly would like to delve more into this conversation, because now, as I mentioned, it's a business, and in order to protect yourself, and with the Data Protection Act coming up with regards to the consequences that businesses will face if the data is not secure, not just internally now where we're seeing the issues with companies, but now you have a second level that you now have to concern about, that if the customer data is out there, what are the consequences or the fines that you will have to pay for that. So thank you so much, David, for you and Info Exchange family. And I do look forward to seeing you at BizTech. And stay tuned for the next Lunch and Learn session as we delve into other topics of discussion for you. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Let's get it. Good. I'm off.